today we're not going to talk about success. Today we're going to talk about the role of failure in innovation. A lot of people ask us, how do you innovate? How do you approach problems that have never been done before? And to be honest, we didn't really have a good idea until we sat down to analyze our experience. And what we've realized is that a lot of it boils down to how you treat failure. We've all heard, don't be afraid of failure. Failure is a necessary part of success. But we believe that this is very incomplete advice, because not all failures are created equally. This shows how we currently understand failure. It shows the increasing cost of failure as we progress through an innovative project. At the beginning, the cost of failure is small. We're free to make mistakes. We're free to fail. We're free to learn. But as we progress, the cost of failure increases substantially, and we have to plan for and treat failure very differently.
Small failures are key to invention and innovation. Failure here can be as simple as wrecking your prototype. Maybe it didn't work as well as you expected or as you had designed. This is a prototype for the Atlas helicopter's main rotor hub. What we do is spool string around the rim of this thing and then unwind it like a ripcord to turn the rotors. Starting out with this component, we knew that it had to bear a force of about 150 pounds. But our first crack at the barrel really only held 30 pounds, which was not sufficient, clearly. But at this point, we have time to go back, isolate what went wrong, figure out why, iterate, and try again. Sometimes we find that an entire concept is flawed, like the main wing structure for our flapping wing aircraft. When we started this project, we had a lot of theoretical knowledge, but not much in terms of hands-on experience. We devised an efficient wing structure, but when we built the prototype, we found the thin and floppy leading edge would crumple like a pop can. However, this is not a crushing defeat at this stage. We have time to go back to the drawing board and try again. Now, we're glad we built that prototype so that we didn't build the entire airplane that way. These kinds of small innovations are not rocket science. This is just the scientific method. Small failures are key to systematically discovering the rules that govern the world around us and figuring out, how we can survive within those bounds. When coming up with each of these solutions, it's important to check that you're making incremental progress and that you're making forward steps towards your goal. If you keep having a lot of failures without showing any signs of improvement, you may need to redo the numbers on your original goal. Maybe it's not as feasible as you thought it was. Down here, low on the curve, early in the project, everything you may have heard is true. Don't be afraid to fail early, and fail often.
But what about the big failures? As we progress through this curve, obviously we see that this curve starts to skyrocket. This is the area that we call the area of exponentially increasing cost of failure, or the epic failure. Epic failures come in a variety of forms, but this is what it looks like for us. This is when we start taking our vehicles into the air. And they say for human-powered aircraft, you never fly higher than you're willing to fall. This is when we start taking our vehicles up to speed. This is when the rubber hits the road. And at 100 kilometers an hour, failure can come at you pretty quickly. After many small failures like this, what you saw in the introduction was our first attempt at the AHS Sikorsky Prize. And this is our second attempt. I don't know about you, but I think it's maybe a good idea to at least have a healthy fear of this kind of failure. It's this fear of the epic failure that motivates us to test our hypothesis early. If we're trying something new, there's going to be failure somewhere, and it's much better to fail early than it is to fail late. What we found is that more often than not, these epic failures are caused because we didn't take the time to fail early. One of the best examples when we were working on new steering geometry for one of our bicycles. I won't go into the technical details, but needless to say, we thought it was a brilliant idea. We were on a very tight timeline. We didn't have time to prototype. We ended up finishing the bike literally the day before the competition. The next day, turns out we can't keep the bike upright for more than about 6 seconds. It's literally uncontrollable. You'd think that we would learn, but the next year, 3 days before the World Human Powered Speed Challenge, we installed a brand new set of tires. We had finally acquired these super fast, ultra low rolling resistance tires. They weren't actually specifically designed to be on a bicycle. Again, we didn't have time to properly test, put them on anyway, and we end up crashing at over 100 kilometers an hour. But innovation takes time, and that if we don't have, the question in approaching something new is not, do we have the time to succeed? The question is, do we have the time to fail? And if we don't have the time to fail, then we don't have the time to innovate.
So, as I said, unfortunately, sometimes you're stuck with the time crunch, but you have to innovate to do something that's never been done before. In 2012, we decided to take on the greatest remaining prize in aviation. In 1980, the Sikorsky Prize was founded for a helicopter powered only by the pilot to fly for 1 minute and briefly reach an altitude of 3 meters. In the 30 years before we had started this project, no one had come even close. People had flown for only 20 seconds or less, and maybe a few inches off the ground. We knew that we wanted to avoid reinventing the wheel, but that some kind of drastic change was required. Something had to be dramatically different. The tough part was that we were in a breakneck race, a head-to-head competition with one of the best helicopter research labs in the world, so we had to move fast. We cut corners wherever possible. For the overall design of the Atlas, we went with a quad rotor design because we knew that it would be stable. We didn't have time to build the entire helicopter, only then to find out that it was uncontrollable. As for the construction techniques, we were sure to go with methods wherever possible that were familiar to us to save time. However, we couldn't avoid the risks required for 2 key innovations. One was the aircraft's size, and the second was a method of flight controls. In building a helicopter efficient enough to take on this prize, we decided to make it twice as big as anything that had ever come before. This required a dramatically different kind of lightweight structure, which gave Atlas the size of a 737 airliner, but a weight of just 120 pounds, leading to it being unbelievably flexible. As for controls, no one had even tried to control a human-powered helicopter before. We devised an elaborate but efficient system of levers, wires, and wingtip surfaces to make the helicopter go where we wanted to. Under the gun, we built Atlas with a small team in a barn in just 3 months. But flight testing took 9 months, with 9 months of crashing and many failures before we were ready to take a shot at the Sikorsky Prize. Early on in the process, we had to figure out how to navigate these 2 innovations. We had to learn to manage and tune this incredibly large and extremely flexible string-based structure, which at first wouldn't even stand up straight and just wanted to flop over every time the pilot got on. During our initial testing, the controls were responsible for almost all of our early crashes and failures. We had to eventually just throw away that system and go with an entirely new concept late in the game that utilized pilot lean to tilt the rotors to get the helicopter to go where we wanted. And really, this system worked better than we could have hoped for, and there's definitely an element of luck here. Now, when pursuing innovation, you really need to champion promising solutions, like these controls, to examine their full potential. But sometimes you get too attached. You need a metric or an objective evaluation to figure out when something's holding you back and when it's time to jump off that sinking ship. So time and preparation limits risk. If you have the capability to learn and fail early and only innovate when you have time, that's going to produce the best results. However, you can only do so much preparation, and you can only prepare maybe for only so many contingencies. At some point, you just have to let it fly. The cost of failure curve earlier is a perfect analogy for our flight testing program on the helicopter. Early in the process, when we're just flying low to the ground, failures aren't a big deal. If you crash, we can often fly again after a brief repair on that same day. However, later in the project, as we approach the goal of the prize, we're doing higher flights up to 3 meters, and the cost of failure can increase by a factor of 20 or more. Twice, we crashed from high altitude, destroying much of the helicopter, and it definitely hurts to fail from that high up. It's important to do all of your preparation and take precautions. Why? Because if there are 100 things on your checklist, the one item you miss is going to be what goes wrong and destroys your entire airplane.
So once at the end of one of our talks, someone said, sure, that's great. You say you failed, you got back up, and you succeeded. But be honest, how hard was it to get back up, and how much did you want to quit? And yes, I will be honest, this was a very long and very difficult journey. At the end of our second major crash, I lay there with my head buried in the turf for about 2 minutes before gathering the courage to stand back up. And then buried my head in my girlfriend's shoulder for another couple minutes before actually gathering the courage to turn around and look at the wreckage behind me. There were many times on this project where I wanted it to be over, and doubt makes those times all the more difficult. We knew that we were close, and we knew that it was possible. At the same time, we knew that the University of Maryland could snatch up the prize at any time, and we also knew that every time we crashed, the helicopter was getting heavier from repairs, making our task even more difficult. I think that navigating the space between failure and success is really about navigating the space between doubt and confidence. And in that respect, I think there's 4 key things that can really help us out. The first is vision. Having the ability to visualize the road ahead and to believe in the end destination. And this may come naturally to some people, but it doesn't for a lot of us. Fortunately, this is something that we can train. Olympic athletes spend countless hours visualizing success, playing over and over and over in their head that perfect run until it becomes a part of them. Of course, vision without substance is not getting us anywhere, and we need to have the courage to put our vision to the test. We knew that we were close, and we knew that it was possible because we had tested everything along the way. It's this early testing and these early failures that give us the confidence to know that we're on the right track. The third is simply willpower. We don't actually get stronger when we fail. We get stronger when we get back up. And getting back up takes willpower. It's a muscle that we need to train at every opportunity. It was through progressively bigger and bigger failures that our team developed the strength to get back up. Which brings me to my last point, which is a support structure that believes in you. Of course, it's good to have a healthy dose of skepticism, but life is way too short to be surrounded by people that don't believe in you. This was a team that knew how to get back up. And it was a team that knew how to get back up, and the unconditional support of our family and friends around us that gave us the confidence to put things back together and make a third attempt at the Sikorsky Prize. Well, it actually worked that time.
So, after 18 months of intensity and 3 all-or-nothing attempts, we finally won the Sikorsky Prize. So you can see that innovation takes time, and often innovation takes heartbreak. What can you take away from these experiences to apply to your everyday life? I know for our part, we test ideas earlier and iterate, we try to plan better, and we try to better manage risk. You can view every opportunity to learn as a chance to take away as much as possible, rather than just going through the motions. For our part, we hope to have learned enough from a lot of hurried testing and maybe some insufficient preparation before speeding down the highway on last year's bike, to go back this fall and break the human-powered speed record at 134 kilometers per hour. Ultimately, we're all trying to get better at what we do, and just treading water is not going to be the key to fulfillment. In this kind of changing and dynamic world, especially for those in technology and business, ultimately, can you afford not to innovate? So, the next time you're testing a big idea, or a day comes down when everything is going to be on the line, ask yourself, are you just going to worry about that epic fail? Are you going to take the time to learn and fail early so that you'll be ready to succeed? Thanks.